In today's video, you are going to see how an atheist reads the Bible and makes up a sexual assault claim and then abandons it once he realizes his inconsistency. And as he continues to talk about things through the book of Genesis in chapter 29, I'll also reveal other things he talks about as well. And this will be beneficial for you in a number of different ways. Obviously, number one, we're getting to go through the scriptures and discuss them, which is always great for Christians. But secondly, it's also powerful for us because we get to hear some sort of commentary from an unbeliever and see some of the things they actually say and how you can actually rebut those things as well. Either way, this will help you on your journey as a Christian to know more about what the Bible is actually saying. So let's begin with him basically plucking out this sexual assault claim out of thin air. Genesis 29 is about one of the patriarchs in the Old Testament, Jacob, traveling back to his grandfather's homeland in order to find a wife. Now, as he enters into the particular region, he sees somebody, and listen to what this atheist says about this particular scenario.
Jesus, Jacob! Not okay! Ask for some damn permission. That is not how you greet your cousin, or anyone.
Now, there's obviously nothing in the text which would suggest there was anything improper about this. But he goes out of his way to play this up as some sort of sexual assault where Jacob didn't ask for permission or anything along those lines. But the sickening thing about this whole situation is 45 seconds later on in his video, notice what he says in regards to this situation where Jacob now is introduced to her father.
Oh, so everyone's just kissing their relatives now.
So just as the Bible said that Jacob kissed Rachel, the Bible goes on to say a few verses later that Jacob kissed, or Laban kissed, Jacob. But obviously the gig is up, and the friendly atheist here in this particular scenario can't obviously make the same argument, so he totally just abandons that previous argument. This was just customary of that period in time, and people still do this kind of stuff today. Now obviously that woman who Jacob kissed, we find out her name is Rachel, and this is another scenario which the friendly atheist has used to bring up an old argument he's continued to bring up, which I've consistently addressed in previous videos in this particular series. But listen to what he says.
Oh, it's a biblical woman with a name. She must be important.
I've obviously dealt with this previously, as I just said a moment ago, but there's multiple examples of people in the scripture up until the point, females that is, and we're given their names. But I've also given a very powerful reason early on in this series, which shows why women not being given a name in this scenario isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now, he also speaks about how this whole encounter has new wife written all over it.
And the shepherds were from Haran, which means they're Abraham's people. This has new wife written all over it.
And it's almost like the friendly atheist isn't really putting the chapters together. Because in the previous chapter in Genesis 28, Jacob was sent out, as I talked about at the start of this video, by his father to go to his grandfather's territory, right, and basically find a spouse. Now, one of the things we read about in Genesis 29 is where Jacob is engaging with these herdsmen. And one of the things the friendly atheist brings up in this video is where he starts talking about how, why are they making such a big deal about giving the flock drink all at the same time.
The shepherds act like they can't roll away the stone themselves until every sheep is there. It's okay.
It would make more sense and be more efficient to give them all drink at the same time, opposed to giving half of them drink and then the other half coming along and then giving them drink at some point in the future. I've kind of alluded to this already in today's video, that the whole point of Jacob being here is to find a wife. Now, Rachel's dad Laban obviously says that Jacob should stay with him and asks him what his wages should be. Jacob doesn't turn around and ask for a particular monetary wage. He basically just says, let me marry your daughter Rachel after I've worked for you for 7 years. Now listen to what some of Hemet has to say based on what Jacob basically just said.
Haha, you thought I was gonna ask for money? Never. Just give me my smoking hot cousin's uterus and I am all yours for 7 years. That's just dumb negotiating.
Now imagine this. Imagine if Jacob had turned around and said, I'll marry your daughter, right, after I work for you for just 2 weeks. I'm pretty certain that atheists like the friendly atheists and others would turn around and say, oh, look how much he's devaluing a female. But when he says, I'll work for 7 years, all of a sudden it's still a problem. And this is a question I could pose to you who's watching this video, and even to any atheist who watches this video. Would you work for 7 years in order to be in a position to qualify to marry somebody's daughter? Think about 7 years worth of wages right now. Would you give your father-in-law that sort of money as a token, as a sign that I'm serious about marrying your daughter? Obviously, Laban would see that this is obviously a guy who's serious about his daughter. This is obviously somebody who can seriously work in order to provide for his daughter. And like Laban says in the passage, it's better that I give her to you than somebody else. After obviously fulfilling his obligation and working for 7 years, Jacob goes on to Laban and say, look, I want to now marry my wife and obviously begin having children, etc. Listen to what Hamet says though.
Some men ask a woman's father for her hand in marriage. This guy demands the father hand over his daughter because it's been 7 years and he is horny as hell.
Now the problem with this is, we just discussed this previously in the video. Jacob had already asked and agreed to take his daughter Rachel's hand in marriage. So 7 years later, why would he now be saying again, can I take your daughter in marriage, if they've already agreed to that previously already? Now next we're going to see the friendly atheist try to rock the sexual assault boat again, but this time he's going to pull a logical fallacy. And he's going to use an argument for silence to try and say that there was no consent in regards to this marriage.
I planted your seeds, now I'd like to plant my own seeds. I plowed the field, now I would like to plow your daughter. I hoed the garden, now give me my I guess Rachel's opinion is irrelevant here.
Now, just as Hemet Meta tried to make an argument from silence and say, look, there's no consent from Rachel here, how is that any more valid than me now turning around and saying, well, there's no complaint on her part either? But something else we can discuss as well, which is relevant to this sort of situation, is the fact that in the passage, there's no discussion of Rachel trying to run away or being displeased or anything like this. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because Hemet tried to make this argument previously, and this was one of the things I brought up in the previous example, which we talked about when we were discussing Genesis chapter 16. I'll leave that linked in the description box below, along with the whole playlist for you to consider watching after this video. But even more so on top of this as well, as we move into newer chapters in the book of Genesis, we're going to see that when Jacob is leaving, Rachel is willing to leave with Jacob and leave her father behind. Now, in the narrative, as you read through Genesis 29, you're going to find out that Jacob goes on to marry Rachel, but not only Rachel, her sister Leah as well. And the friendly atheist basically highlights how this is a problem and nobody seems to have a problem with it.
He finished the week with Leah. You're not who I wanted, but my pants are already down to my ankles, so we might as well finish. And then he jumps to the top of the bunk bed and does the same thing to the other daughter. And everyone is apparently fine with all of this.
Now, obviously, if you read through the passage, you can see quite clearly that this was not Jacob's intention in the beginning. He was obviously duped by Rachel and Leah's father, Laban. But the fact of the matter is, it's strange that the friendly atheist is highlighting and trying to say nobody has any issues with this. Obviously, the passage is highlighting the problems with this scenario. But in the same sort of time period, anyway, why would this be strange to people at the time when they were into things like sleeping with animals, or the fact that a man and his son could sleep with the same woman and it wouldn't be a problem anyway? But he goes on to speak about how Jacob continues to sleep with Leah and have children, even though he apparently doesn't love her.
Oh no, another one. Jacob, use some contraception or else you're gonna have a third kid with the wife you don't even like.
Now, when we first read about the pair, the Bible talks about how he loves Rachel more than he loves Leah. So obviously, if he loves one more than the other, that obviously means there is some sort of love there anyway. But obviously in this scenario, when the Bible's speaking about him hating her or not loving her, it's speaking about in the sense of preference, choice. He obviously loves Rachel. He wanted to marry Rachel. And obviously the fact of the matter is, as her husband, he's not in the right position if he's going to be leaving her out in the cold and obviously not giving her her marital right. And obviously favoritism is one of the clear problems we see with several polygamous relationships all the way throughout the Bible. And this is no surprise that in the book of Deuteronomy, God basically legislates against this in certain ways. Now, next time we're going to see what Hemet Meta has to say about Genesis chapter 30. And is it going to be a surprise that Hemet Meta makes up another sexual assault claim again?